Mark Attanasio is also in touch with Rob Manfred, the current MLB commissioner, multiple times per week, as he was with Bud Selig when he was commissioner. Mark Attanasio is also CEO and co-founder of Crescent Capital, a multi-billion-dollar management firm. Following Mark, we will hear from David Stearns. David is in his 5th season with the Brewers. He was named the 9th general manager in team history on October 5th, 2015, and is now also president of baseball operations. Since becoming the Brewers general manager at the young age of 30, David has successfully implemented an approach to building and retaining talent through player development, drafting, trades, and free agency signings that has produced the on-the-field success we are all enjoying. Following David, we will hear from manager Craig Counsell. Craig was named the 19th manager in Brewers franchise history in May 2015. As we know, Craig grew up in Whitefish Bay, was an exceptional baseball player, 2 times World Series champion, and returned to Milwaukee first as a player for the team and then as a special assistant to general manager Doug Melvin from 2012 to 2015. Following the Brewers, we will hear a COVID-19 health update from Dr. John Raymond, President and CEO of the Medical College. So for today's program, the Q&A box is open. We encourage you to submit questions, which we will address following the speaker's comments. So let me begin first with Mark Attanasio. Mark, I have some questions for you. I know how important the game of baseball is to you personally. Can you describe the responsibility you feel regarding your role as chairman and principal owner of the Milwaukee Brewers baseball team and as steward of baseball in Milwaukee?
Thanks, David. And also just a couple of words of thanks at the start. First, to you, David, for your tireless efforts on behalf of the community and for all the help you've given us on the finance committee for the team during this difficult period. We really appreciate you. I appreciate everyone on the phone taking the time today to talk about the challenges we face in getting back on the field. We're going to need a collaborative, this will be the ultimate collaborative effort. And, we've got just the organization and the community to undertake and succeed at that. And appreciate, Julia, you getting everybody together today for this call. I had a wonderful mentor in Bud Selig. Nobody better to teach you how to run an organization, how to be a leader in the community, how to really put the game of baseball first and your own interests second. As an owner, I would say I probably spoke to him multiple times a day my first year in overseeing the team, and so the notion of stewardship is something I really got from Bud. The team would, baseball has been part of the fabric of Wisconsin back to the 1940s or even before. There were Mr. Selig and his group brought the Brewers to Wisconsin in 1970, and Selig family owned with his group the team. Our family, likewise with our investor group, prominent of which is the Lubar family. But we're really just stewards for the next generation and the next generation of fans, the next generation of people in the state. So it's owning a baseball team is really a true public-private partnership, and nowhere does the need for the public part and the private part come together, greater than it does in a time of need. Guess we'll talk about that, David, a little bit today. But I want to say that, the 16 years that we've owned the team, the things that stand out to me even more than, and we talked about this with our sponsors right before we all sheltered in this year, even more than the great success and excitement on the field, excitement going back to when Carlos Gomez scored a winning run to get us to the conference finals, jumped over the wall and jumped on him. not typical for me. But the way we come together in difficult times really, really shines. And I have to say the outpouring of effort, cooperation, the way everybody has shared the pain in our organization to try to get us through this is really makes me extremely proud to be part of this, and really motivates me to be as tireless as I can be to get baseball back and back this summer to Wisconsin. So just want to thank everyone in our organization at Milwaukee Brewers who pulled together and got us to this point, which I guess we'll talk about. We're on the precipice of what we need to do to play baseball in the summer of 2020. And I think we're going to.
So Mark, the Brewers are a major economic engine for the city and county of Milwaukee, as well as the state of Wisconsin. Can you give us some scope of the total economic impact the Brewers have on our economy?
Well, I'd say, it's interesting. We talk a lot about gathering places, and I guess now the notion of gathering creates a lot of nervousness, but there's really no better place to gather. And I continue to hear this from people around the country than Miller Park. I actually, our dogs yesterday, Debbie and I were on a walk, and our dogs met the dog of a Cubs owner. The dog was very friendly, but I should say Cubs fan, but the Cubs fan in his T-shirt was saying how much he loved Miller Park. And Miller Park has been, frankly, it's the reason when I first visited. I've been to Wisconsin a few times because my younger brother's married to a woman from Wisconsin, and they run Stein's Home and Gardens. But I walked into the corner in right field and looked up at this magnificent structure and couldn't believe that something like that, existed in a small city. Much the same way I felt about when I walked into the Milwaukee Museum. And we talk about public-private partnership. That's been a model of a public-private partnership and how we work together with the Stadium District. Well.
Is that Rob Manfred calling you?
Bud Seeley calling. There it is.
Oh.
Commissioner, I'm on the Greater Milwaukee Committee call. I'll call you back. On cue.
Yeah.
That was not staged, everyone. Anyway, we've managed in a period of 16 years to retire the debt, and retire the sales tax, I should say. And we have what is still a state-of-the-art facility 20 years later, at the same time that other communities have ballparks that are getting torn down, or teams are threatening to move because they don't really have an appropriate place to play. And that's a function of how the governments in the state worked with the private organization. Also a function of how the we get unbelievable fan support. Last year we had, I think we were number 8 in Major League Baseball in terms of fan support. And sponsorship every year goes up, whether we have a good year or not. So everybody, when I talk about how everyone pulls together, the stadium's a perfect example how everyone is pulled together to have a facility that's state-of-the-art 20 years later. And, we've commissioned an economic impact study that showed it brought $2.5 billion of, revenues to the state and the community. I'm quite confident that over time, we'll figure out some of the health guidelines we need to so that we can all be safe in large venues again. And, looking forward, I think Miller Park, and the team, as is true with the other two major sports teams in Wisconsin, are, major engines for growth and stability. People go to a state, it creates jobs because there are sports teams, there are symphonies, there's things to do other than just watch Netflix. And, Miller Park's an important part of that.
Thank you, Mark. At your core, both you and your wife, Debbie, are very philanthropic, both in your hometown of LA as well as here in Milwaukee. Can you describe what you, the team, and the Brewers Community Foundation have been doing to provide support to others in our community during the pandemic?
Gosh, that was not Commissioner Seelig. And I've now shut my phone off. I thought I had it off. Yeah, thanks, David. When I bought the team with our group, we talked about 4 key things we wanted to accomplish, starting with turning the team around on the field, which we did. We wanted to be a model organization to work for. We wanted to be a leader in the community. And, we wanted to have a charitable organization that we could be proud of. And frankly, I dragged my feet on that, not because it wasn't important, but just because I was so focused on the others. And I really give Debbie credit for pushing me to say, look, we've got to get this going. You said you were going to do it and you haven't done anything. So we're very fortunate to, we'd interviewed a number of candidates and we found Cecilia Gore to lead our effort. We rebranded Brewers Charities as Brewers Community Foundation. And, it's been a model of support, I think, for baseball teams and how to integrate with the community. So every year, we get collaborative support from fans. We have a 50-50 raffle. We raise millions of dollars a year, which we then redistribute in the community, generally to 200 organizations. This year, we didn't have the benefit of that 50-50 raffle, but nevertheless, we created a $1 million fund to compensate our part-time stadium workers. A lot of the people we walk around and really help us the most in the ballpark are part-time, whether they're in parking, concessions, or cleaning business. Our players threw in another $350,000. Bob Euchre contributed, and we have a new Brewer sponsor, Monkey Knife Fight, that is also pitched in. So thanks to everyone for helping with that. We also partnered with the United Way of Milwaukee and Waukesha County and the MK Response Fund with the Greater Milwaukee Foundation to contribute money to causes directly related to COVID-19. And as part of what I call my day job at Crescent, we partnered with Wahlburgers and the Milwaukee Fire Department to deliver meals to frontline workers in the Milwaukee area. One of the things I found, the frontline workers in these hospitals, nurses, in particular, when you decide to dedicate your life to taking care of others, you don't think you're risking your life. And now all of a sudden, nurses are risking their lives, and reaching out to them in a very direct way and thanking them is something that is, I think, profoundly important. Having the firefighters bring the food shows how they appreciate, even those folks who risk their lives appreciate the nurses. And David Stearns on this call, I think, donned a couple of masks and helped hand out food. So thank you, David, for that. We're going to continue to look for ways, now that the markets are stable, to put money back into the community. We've done, I think, a good job on the finance side, building a small endowment for Brewers Community Foundation, and at one point the value of that was down, and I wanted to preserve it. As it's started to rebound, we will look to put more money back into the community. Finally, relative to, doing something that's fun, we've had these Miller Lite virtual happy hours with current and former Brewer greats, and with others, comedians, live, national music artists. And these are very popular with fans. I know they're very popular in our household, and we'll look to continue that, ways to engage with fans as best we can before we get back on the field.
Okay, Mark, so you've shared with us how serious you are about baseball and how important the Brewers are to you. You've described how important the Brewers are to our community, both from an entertainment perspective and financially, and how committed you are to the betterment of our community. So now the question is, will the players be on the field sometime this year? So as a member of the MLB Executive Committee, you have insight into each team, both how the pandemic has affected their community, but also how the economics of each team and the variability in the level and mix of revenues and expenses vary by each team in terms of player payroll, total attendance, parking and concession revenues, the local sponsorship and media revenues, the operating cost. So there are players making many millions of dollars per year and others at hundreds of thousands. How does MLB pull together the owners and the players to unite their common interests with the fans and come to an agreement to play baseball and give our country a needed boost? That's the big question.
That's a big question. And you threw me a few softballs before that one. I appreciate the warm up, the batting practice for this. Look, this is critical importance. Baseball has played a healing role in this country forever. It's one of the reasons it's the national pastime, whether it's in the aftermath of wars, terrorist events. Now we find in the aftermath of a pandemic, we have the opportunity to really be the first sport to get out and play, and help repair the damage that's been done. I think we're all mindful the fact that 40 million jobs have been, probably 30 some odd million jobs have been lost. Unemployment's at 40 million. It's an astonishing number. Larger than the Great Depression. And we all have a responsibility to, I believe, try to give back to the folks in the country who've supported this industry, so richly all these years, so that it's such a fabric of America. And before I get to the difficult topic of economics, and I have a pretty simple highway to explain it, I just want to emphasize, first and foremost, and I spoke to Governor Evers about this, I spoke to Mayor Barrett about this, if we're going to play games, it's important to safely stage those games. And to do that, I've talked a lot about partnership and collaboration today. We're going to have to be collaborative with local leaders, not only politicians, but maybe more importantly, healthcare professionals. Dr. Raymond's on the call today. He's one of the folks Mayor Barrett pointed me to that we'll have to work closely with. Dr. Ben Watson as well. Jeanette Kowalik, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, who's a commissioner of health for the city. We'll be working closely with as well as Mayor Barrett and talking to Governor Evers. It's more of a local, it's purely, it's more intensely a local level. We need to have everybody working together. And likewise, we're going to need to work with a lot of the business people on this call because, we need to get back, not just for the dollars and cents of getting back, but in America, we need to all get back to the way of life that we all love. And everyone loves, going to Brewers games in the summer. So we've got to figure out how to do that safely. And I put on my list of responsibilities figuring how to get Bob Uecker in the ballpark, who wants to come and announce games, whether people tell him it's safe or not. I told Tyler Barnes and Rick Schlesinger are going to make sure it's safe for him to get in the ballpark and broadcast when we do. So we're gonna have to work with that whole group, and then as well with all our colleagues. Everyone around this. We talk about safety for the players, but we have to have our fans. When we finally play in front of fans, need to be safe. Our players need to be safe. Our colleagues and employees need to be safe. And so it's an enormous collaborative effort. We have a 68-page medical guide that is, I don't have the papers in front of me because it's so thick. I read it electronically. I've learned how to do that. And we're getting comments from all the teams in all these different communities. We're getting comments from the Players Association that represents 750 players. And we'll be getting, comments from folks on the ground who actually have to administer. It's great to have 68 pages of document on what you can do to keep people safe. But if you can't actually execute that, it'll be a challenge. You'll also mention when we think about how to compete, this is a little off the page, but something to consider. I saw that Max Scherzer said that, we talk about keeping players healthy as a way teams compete. The teams that can keep their players healthy, if we get back on the field this year, are going to have an advantage over teams that may have a COVID-19 outbreak. So, it's critically important, not only for first and foremost for everybody's health and safety, but also for those of us who care about competing. It's important for that reason as well. And, we've already started discussions on all of this with everyone. So once we make it safe to play, the question is, what does it mean economically? Because at some point, you have all the costs of staging a baseball game, and without fans, you have no revenues. The live gate, in fact, David, I've said to you, when we all got in the sports business together, I didn't realize we were getting into the live entertainment business, but we were in the sports business. And actually, league-wide, 40% of the revenues are live gate related: tickets, concessions, parking, et cetera, roughly 40%. So that if we play without fans, that 40% is off the table. In Milwaukee, because of our enormous fan support, it's actually a larger percentage. And so, the challenge of staging these games is, from an economic standpoint, is acute and real. So just give everyone some high-level numbers. Most of these are public, but you generally don't put them together, but I'll put them together here. The industry has approximately $9.4 billion of revenue from all sources, including media. But let's, just for round numbers, let's say it's $10 billion. And so if we play a half a season, that would typically be $5 billion of revenues, right? So now we've talked about how 40% of the revenues are live gate related. So you take 40% of that away, $2 billion away, you go for a half a season from $5 billion down to $3 billion. And in fact, the exact number that's been calculated by the league office, if we play 81 games this year without fans, will be $2.85 billion. So very quickly, you go from $10 billion to $5 billion at a half season. No fans, you're only earning 60% of $3 billion of revenues. That's what you've got. And for all of us who are such good business people in getting to the point that we can own a team, the sport is run as most sports are, more as an enterprise that you create asset value over time, but in a given year you don't really make money. You look to break even. So in a sport that has 10 billion in revenues in a normal year, we have very little cash flow on an aggregate basis, $300 million or less. And roughly half the money goes, of the 10 billion, half goes to players to play, and half goes to staging the games, whether it's all the folks who work for teams or the travel, hotels, anything that goes into staging and running an organization, staging a game, doesn't leave any profit. So I've described the owner's challenge. Here's the player's challenge. The players We normally earn 5 billion in the aggregate. On a half a year would earn 2.5 billion. So if they get their normal rate of pay, that's 2.5 billion. Well, we just described that we're going to earn just under 3 billion this year if we play 81 games without fans. Players at their full rate would earn 2.5 billion, and so that's almost 90% of the revenues would go to pay players at their normal rate. And frankly, that's players who are only getting half of what their contract said they should have gotten. So the challenges are very real. The players are only getting a fraction of their pay. And the owners are in a position of wanting to do the right thing, but having to bear, the cost to stage every game without the revenue to support it. And so we're hoping to work collaboratively with the Players Association to come up with a solution for that, somewhat of a forward-looking solution, because we've got to do that quickly in order to, put the apparatus into place to get back onto the field in early July. I will mention to the group, my strong preference is to play spring training, and I'm getting ahead of ourselves here with all the challenges I just outlined, but to conduct spring training in Miller Park in Wisconsin, bring the boys back in town. I think it'll be a real boost for everyone. But in order to do that, we've got to get through all these medical protocols, get the doctors, the commissioner of health, the mayor, the governor, and everyone to feel safe. I think we can make Miller Park absolutely as safe as we can make American Family Fields in Maryvale safe. And so I'd like to try to do that if I can. Sorry for the long explanation, David.
So Mark, can you at all address kind of the timing and, with so many interests, what is the apparatus, so to speak, to come to a decision? Who needs to approve this aside from the local community and the mayor and so forth, but at MLB and with the players, how does all that work?
You definitely saved the toughest questions for last. So the way it works, and one of the benefits, for what it's worth, is be careful what you wish for. So being on the executive council and the labor committee, I'm really right at the front line in this case of everything that's going on, and have input into it, which I think is important because our market is quite unique in the disparity between the live gate and the media that we have. But that all said, I think the folks on the front line here in the Labor and Executive Council are all committed to getting baseball, bringing baseball back, and that's important. But the be careful what you wish for part is hours every day, which my wife Debbie can attest to, are spent trying to work through these very, very difficult problems. And we've been working on it for months. The short answer is it's got to come together very quickly, and or we won't be able to. We will just run out of time. We've been the medical protocols. We've been consulting with doctors who used to the doctor who used to run the CDC and 4 national hospitals. I think Dr. Raymond on the phone here, if he hasn't seen the guidelines yet, will find them to be quite robust. And the numbers, unfortunately, while we've, I could send you reams of computer models on the numbers, but there's kind of 4 top line numbers like I just described. And, the challenge we have is we have about $3 billion of a half a season of revenues, and to pay players at a full contract rate, that would pretty much 90% of that would go to pay them and wouldn't cover any other costs. So we've got to figure that out and figure that out quickly. And I do think both sides want to come to a solution, and hopefully when there's a will, there's a way.
Okay, Mark, thank you. I think you've done an excellent job of posing the economics of the situation, and that, yes, it's going to take great cooperation from all sides. We, the fans, remain hopeful. So for the listeners on the call, if you have questions, please use the Q&A function. And following David and Craig, I'll be addressing some of those questions to the three of them. So I'd like to now move on to David Stearns, if we may.
Hi, David.
Okay, David. So just as you make some comments, if you could, just some thoughts as to, I think, what the listeners on the call would like to hear would be, what are you doing to deal with the pandemic in terms of a shortened season and player safety? And how do you build a roster? And how do you prepare for the draft with all this change? And there are rule changes. And, are those good rule changes or difficult ones to cope with? And so I know you have a lot of thoughts, but if you could try and address some of those topics, that would be appreciated.
Absolutely. And I'll run through a couple of different topics, and I'll start with some of the health protocols that you and Mark were just talking about, because I do know that's top of everyone's mind, and that's top of our mind. What we must ensure is that we can keep everyone involved with our operations safe. If we are going to get players back on the field, if we are going to restart a season, and I'm very optimistic that we can, we have to ensure that we can keep everyone safe and that we can provide the appropriate protocols to do so. So there are a couple of different ways we can go about doing this. And as Mark mentioned, they're outlined in a 68-page document that at this point we've all read through in baseball circles with a fine-tooth comb and picked it apart and offered feedback to the commissioner's office. But there are a couple different aspects of that. The first is an extraordinarily robust testing apparatus. Everyone associated with Major League players, not just Major League players, but everyone associated with them gets tested multiple times a week, at least multiple times a week. Many people will be tested almost daily. Beyond the testing, there are a certain set of guidelines that operators and teams have to follow in order to create safe working environments for our players and coaches and staff. And so we have to follow, in a clubhouse setting, all of the same social distancing guidelines, all the same good hygiene practices that a normal business is going to have to follow in order to safely open up. So what does this mean? It means reconfiguring a lot of our clubhouse spaces. It means providing extra space for our players to go through their normal routines. It means encouraging our players to spend more time outside. As we learn more about this virus, we learn that being inside, in particular, in a crowded group, probably isn't particularly advisable. The more time you can spend outside, if you're with other people or in some proximity to other people, you probably reduce your risk a little bit. We have detailed guidelines such that Craig now has an assigned seat in the dugout. I don't know if Craig's going to love that too much, but we have social distancing protocols in our dugout to make sure that our coaches and players do not get too close to each other. We have guidelines for our coaches on the field, how close they can get to players. And of course, we have very standard and stringent PPE guidelines so that anyone who is in a clubhouse coming into contact with other people is fully equipped with the appropriate PPE. And we believe we will be able to accomplish that. So the health regulations are robust. They've been thought out comprehensively by Major League Baseball, now the Players Associations, and as Mark mentioned, all clubs are now providing very significant feedback to try to make it both a safe environment for players and an environment in which their normal work can be accomplished. Because after all, we do need to get world-class athletes ready to compete at a major league caliber every single night. And so that does require a level of activity. It requires a level of medical attention. And so we need to accomplish all of those things, and we need to accomplish all of them in a very safe manner. So that's really the medical standpoint, and that is far and away the most important, and that's where everyone has spent the most time to this point. From my perspective, in terms of how we look forward and how we potentially adjust and adapt to a season, it actually is enjoyable, and it's fun. I think for all of us at this point to envision what our roster could look like, and how the different pieces could come into play. There's speculation and discussion about potentially an expanded roster. There's speculation and discussion about potentially having a universal DH, so that we would play with a designated hitter and the pitcher wouldn't hit. These are things that perhaps we didn't anticipate when we were envisioning our roster and creating our roster this offseason. But it gives us a chance to reimagine some things and how our pieces fit together, how we can construct our roster. We've always been an organization that has believed in depth. We've always been an organization that believes it takes 35 to 45 players to really contribute throughout the course of a major league season in order to have success. And so we think we are well positioned should some of those roster changes occur, and we're able to get everyone back on the field. And I know that's something that Craig can speak to as well. And then lastly, David, you mentioned the draft and how different that may look this year. And you're right, it's going to be very different. Our draft in baseball is usually 40 rounds. This year, it's going to be 5 rounds. We usually spend the entirety of the spring out scouting players in person, watching them in person, whether that's high schools or colleges. We start scouting players during their early careers in high school, and we follow them all the way through until they're draft eligible, either as high school seniors or during their collegiate careers. We usually do this largely in person, which means we have groups of scouts traveling all around the country, finding players and watching them. Naturally, all of these seasons have been canceled. Travel isn't particularly safe right now and hasn't been. So we have been doing predominantly video scouting. We're fortunate that we have a large volume of video that we've accumulated over the past couple of years. We're among the 30 teams in baseball. I think we're probably ahead of the pack in terms of the amount of video and the accessibility of the video that we had. So we've transitioned in the way that we're evaluating players at this point. We're doing it largely off video. We're looking at performance track records and granular data accumulated from past seasons. And so that does make the decision process a little bit different. It makes the evaluation process different. But we also know that all 30 clubs are dealing with this. And so there's no disadvantage on our end. And if anything, we think we're particularly well prepared to handle an environment like this because of some of the measures we had taken in the past. So the draft is June 10th. In fact, right before I hopped on this call, I was on a Zoom meeting with a number of our scouts going through some players. We're excited for it. It's certainly refreshing for all of us to be able to talk about baseball and look at baseball players and make evaluations. And we're certainly looking to going through the draft and hopefully, if we can get everything in line, not too shortly thereafter, have a spring training start up and then a regular season. So I think it's fun for all of us to talk about baseball, to envision what it could look like this summer in Miller Park, in Milwaukee, to provide our fans and the city a diversion. And certainly that's our goal.
All right, David, thank you very much. And we're all on board with you with that positive outlook. So Craig Counsell, you're at bat now. So Craig, what are your challenges? How do you keep the players engaged and fit and prepared? And what happens to their daily routine? They were in spring training, and then it was canceled. And what will it be like if there are no fans in the ballpark?
Yeah, afternoon, David. Yeah, I think it's the first part of the pandemic for me is staying in touch with players and how we've kept our players ready. And ready is, I don't think they're ready for opening day this whole time, but just at a certain level, a little bit ready. And look, this uncertainty has really been unique for them. And I've found as we've gone on in this process that when I talk to players, what they really want is they want a date and they want guidance that, up to this point, we've really haven't been able to offer. They want to hear a schedule, and there's not one. Baseball players, they crave, I think most of us really crave some sort of routine, and this has definitely upset that routine. Well, I do feel like we've probably put special emphasis on keeping our pitchers prepared, on probably keeping closer tabs with those guys, understanding their schedules, knowing that they are the ones that are going to be significantly challenged in this new environment because of what you just mentioned, the schedule. And I think, like what David said, that the schedule and the changes that we really don't know the answers to yet. There's, the answers seem to change quickly. But I think that's what personally I'm looking forward to. And I think it is a lot, like David said, it's a lot of fun. I really think a lot of the changes that can fit into the strengths that we've established as an organization. We're hoping for that we can get to an 80, 81 game schedule. That's half of the games that we normally play, but it's still 81 games. So I think to some clubs, they may try to make it a sprint. It is not. It can't be a sprint. I think it's still 81 games. That's a full NBA season. It's significant, and it's also, we will be playing in a season where we're going to ramp players up very quickly. As I think Mark alluded to a little bit earlier, that the health of players, keeping players healthy in a shortened season may be more challenging than ever, and maybe more important than ever, in various ways. And so I think we're going to start off a season with players, really, we have to be very careful with their health. And it's going to be important that we're, I think, prudent with how much usage that all our players can have early in the season.
So Craig, what are the players doing now? I mean, because some have access to private workout facilities in their home or apartment, or maybe with a neighbor, and others don't. What is there? Do you have any sort of standardized regimes that you want them to follow, or what's happening?
Yeah, so I think it's different for everybody, and the best thing we can do is to stay in contact with them to have them describe it to us. We've had some players start that reside in Arizona to visit the American Fields Family Complex. And then others that we're just staying in contact with them, and they have all set up kind of off-season type scenarios that to continue their training. And like I said, the pitchers, I think, have tried to stay in contact most with them, give them a true schedule, a throwing schedule, a kind of workout schedule, so that when we get together, that we can start quickly with them to get them, in probably about a 3-week process, get them ready for game number 1 of the season.
So one of the questions we've received is, with these potential changes in the rules, the DH and the expanded roster, this is a question for you and David. What do you think about those changes? Are these just for this year, or do you think they'll become more permanent?
Yeah, I think everybody's focus should and is, frankly, on the 2020 season. There's so many hurdles for everyone, from everyone, from the things that Mark is doing, or the things that David's doing, the things that I'm doing. It's like it's hard to focus on something else besides this. There's enough to figure out that we need to focus really just on, let's get some short-term answers to put a good product on the field. In a very challenging environment, a very different environment. I'm fascinated by, I don't, the not having fans in the stands and how that affects how we all do our job. I think is going to be a fascinating part of this. the players will dearly miss fans in the stands. They will dearly miss them. And it's going to be impactful in how our season operates. It's probably the question I've been considering the most, more than the rule changes. Just the environment that we're going to play in is going to be one that's very unique and unlike really players have never, some players haven't felt in a long, long time. So, I think, it's another one of the things that we think about and the challenges that we think about, but, I don't think we should focus on kind of long-term changes at this point. I think we should focus on getting our product back on the field, as quickly and as safely as possible.
Okay. Another one of the questions does relate back to fans being absent, and we have the ability to pipe in fan cheering and things like that. Is that part of the?
I'm sure that's possible. I've thought about this. I was having a conversation with a friend, and we were I wonder if it'll change players a little bit and their personalities. I mean, it feels that instead of a live entertainment event, as Mark said, it's become like we're on a movie set and we're on a TV set, right? It's actors in a TV production. So I do think it could change. I do think the personalities of the players, you're going to see different personalities from the players a little bit at times. And I think that's an interesting part of the product for the TV viewer. I mean, I know the games will be different. I'm fascinated by how the TV viewing experience will be. I think it'll be really interesting. I don't, the other question I'm not sure about, but I think we'll see. I think it'll be a really cool thing to watch is how the lack of fans affects how we all do our job.
Okay, thank you. And so we have a question for David Stearns. Now that you've been promoted to president of baseball operations, has anything changed in your day-to-day routine now that you're a president?
I make my staff call me Mr. President, but other than that, nothing. I completely joking. It really is just reflective of an evolution within the industry, where the leader of baseball operations groups more and more are being coined presidents of baseball operations. But my day-to-day has remained exactly the same. I'm fortunate that we have a really talented staff throughout baseball operations that helps me work through every single day and the various challenges we face. But in terms of my general responsibilities, they've stayed exactly the same.
Okay, well, this has been really interesting and insightful, both on the operational level and the baseball level and the financial level. Are there any additional comments that any of you'd like to share with members of the Greater Milwaukee Committee? If not, I don't think we have any additional questions from the listeners, and very much appreciate your participating and sharing those insights with us. So thank you very much. So
Thanks,
we will
David.
now.
Thank you,
Okay.
David.
Yeah, Mark, thank you. David, thank you, and Craig. And we all look forward to being at the first game with fans. And until then, we look forward to listening to Bob Uecker or watching you on television. So I'd now like to introduce Dr. Raymond, President and CEO of the Medical College, who will give us a COVID-19 health update. Dr. Raymond.
Thanks, David, and good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to give you a quick update on COVID-19 indicators as of yesterday, the last day data were available. Also want to give you a look back, so I'm going to talk about some cumulative data as well. So overall, we've had 193,000 negative tests and about 16,000 positive tests in Wisconsin for a 7.5% positive testing rate. And in Milwaukee, we've had 6,500 positive tests. Our testing capacity in the state continues to grow, up slightly to 14,153 in Wisconsin, with a high daily count of 9,465 on May 22nd. And currently there are 54 laboratories doing testing, with 33 in the planning phases. Our number of cumulative hospitalizations is 2,339, meaning about 15% of those who test positive end up being hospitalized. And currently we have 388 inpatients in Wisconsin hospitals. Our high was 446 on April 9th, and the recent low was 298 on May 6th. We've had a pretty stable number of patients in intensive care units over the last several weeks, at 121 yesterday, with a high of 196 on April 9th and a recent low of 91 on May 5th. And we have plenty of ICU beds available, at 399 open and immediately available today. Next slide, please. Just to look back at the number of deaths that we've had in Wisconsin, 514, with 257 of those being in Milwaukee. 139 of those who've died have been Black or African American, and 342 have been white in Wisconsin. Now in Milwaukee, it's a little bit different. There's a very slight predominance of African American over white in terms of the deaths so far. Doubling times in Wisconsin, 18.5 days, and in Milwaukee, 20.8 days. And recall, back in early March, our doubling times were less than 3 days. So that is progress. On the other hand, the number of cases we have to achieve doubling continues to grow. So we can't be complacent just because the doubling times are extending out. Our daily growth rates over the last 7 days have been 3% in Wisconsin and 3.5% in Milwaukee, again, relatively stable. The number of positive tests out of 7,173 reported yesterday were 307 in Wisconsin at 4.1% positive rate, and 167 in Milwaukee with a 14% positive rate. And the highest number of positive tests in Wisconsin occurred on May 20th with 528, and on the same date in Milwaukee with 297. Our intensive care unit and ventilator capacity remain stable and are adequate. PPE trends are stable in Wisconsin and Milwaukee, with the most acute shortages in gowns and N95 masks, but that situation continues to slowly improve. And the reproductive number, which is a snapshot in time and place of the contagiousness of the COVID-19 virus, is 1.1 in Wisconsin and 1.1 in Milwaukee. And ultimately, we'd like to see that reproductive number be below 1. Next slide, please. On the next slide, I'd just like to make you aware of a new resource sponsored by the Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce and the Medical College of Wisconsin, which is designed to help businesses with a smart restart with sector-specific health and safety checklists. And the web link at the upper right-hand side of the slide can give you more information. Next and last slide, please. And this final slide just shows an example of the framework for those health and safety checklists, with recommendations for opening and operating businesses and protecting workforce, customers, and facilities. And I do hope that you'll find this resource to be useful. And with that, I'll turn it back over to David.
Well, Dr. Raymond, yeah, it's actually Julia is going to come on. And thank you. And it doesn't look like we have any questions. I'm glad to see that we're down to the 1-to-1 reproductive rate. That's an important goal, I believe.
It is.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for sharing your insights with us. And let's hope that these good trends continue.
Thanks, Julia.
Thank you. So wanted to quickly provide an update, and this is a very brief one on our initiatives. We hope that you're all enjoying the COVID-19 interviews with the GMC members. We know there are many stories to tell, and if you're comfortable sharing yours, please reach out to Heather at the GMC to set up your interview. We've been working with our building manager, Grave Wolf Partners, and industry experts on a safe office reopening plan. We created guidelines that can be adjusted as the pandemic continues to change and evolve. We plan to reopen our office for staff only on a limited basis on June 1st. Both staff will remain working from home regularly, but will have the option to schedule time to go into the office if they need resources or space to conduct their work. During the May 11th membership meeting, we shared that the Commons was raising funds for a virtual internship focused on technology, innovation, and professional development. We're happy to announce that sufficient funding has been raised to launch the program with 72 students. And we want to thank the following members who stepped forward and helped fund 11 student interns for the summer. Mary Ellen Stanek through All in Milwaukee, Ted Kellner, Mike Lovell, Linda Mellows, Harris Tur through Anon, and John Kissinger. Thank you very much for your support, and I know these students are going to greatly enjoy it as well. The program's open to students from any college or university, and all degree programs can apply. Students will receive 150 hours of real-world work and connections to professionals from an array of sectors. The demand for this is very high. We've now received over 525 applications for the program. Also showing that the demand for summer internships is very high, as there's very limited ability and opportunities out there. We are still looking for support. If you want to help out, we'd love to host 100 interns altogether. If you're interested in sponsoring an intern, you can reach out to Michael Hostad at the GMC. It's a $3,000 fee to sponsor one student, with $1,500 reserved as an intern stipend. Skill Up Milwaukee continues to host virtual meetings and office hours to ensure that small business owners around our region have the support to pivot strategies and survive the pandemic. And the Brew City Match Collaborative, led by LISC Milwaukee, just announced small business grants and 0% interest loans for area businesses in response to the COVID-19 epidemic. The Emergency Relief Fund has received a significant boost through a $100,000 donation from the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. And these additional funds will provide access to grant and loan capital for another 45 existing businesses within the Brew City Match neighborhood. So that's our update for now, and I will invite David Lubar to close the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Julia. There. Thank you, Julia. And I want to thank all of our speakers for their special insights into what's happening with the Brewers, and Dr. Raymond for what's happening health-wise. And I want to thank everyone for calling in to this webinar. Our next meeting is June 8th, and we look forward to hosting you again on that day. So have a good rest of the day and week, and stay safe. Thank you. And this meeting is now ending.